the middle of Yosemite National Park stands one of nature's most intimidating structures, Half Dome. This enormous granite formation boasts an elevation of over 8,400 feet and a face that is almost completely flat. This formation has stood unascended since its formation, since the beginning of time. That is, until 1875, when George Anderson scaled the entirety of the wall using only metal spikes, a hammer, and rope. Now, when people think of rock climbing, I imagine they typically think of a scene similar to Anderson's ascent. However, nowadays most rock climbing is done indoor in gyms or on well-established routes outside. Not only is rock climbing easy to get into, but has many different disciplines, beginner-friendly technique, and is one of the fastest growing sports in the U.S. Now, there are many disciplines that fall under the umbrella of rock climbing. Three of the most popular are bouldering, top roping, and sports climbing. Now, bouldering is the easiest to get into, as it only requires that you have a pair of shoes, and the walls are the shortest out of all the other climbing disciplines, about 15 to 20 feet. You also don't need anybody to spot you while you're up on the wall, because there's a crash pad usually at the bottom that's sort of like a mattress, and so if you fall on it, you won't hit the ground, you'll hit something soft instead, and you won't hurt yourself. Top roping is a little more involved than bouldering, and it requires that you have someone belay you while you're up on the wall, which not only requires that you have a harness, but the person belaying you also have to have a harness, a carabiner, and an ATC in order to hold the rope and to stop you from falling if you do fall. Now, sports climbing is the most challenging out of all the three, and it's probably the most dangerous too. However, Tom Kirby, who's a climbing instructor for the American Alpine Institute, says that sports climbing has become much safer due to permanent fixed protection, which makes difficult climbs possible for climbers to safely make multiple falls. Now, what he means by that is now that there's fixed anchors up on the wall that you can clip quick draws into, you have less chance of falling all the way down the mountain and instead just falling to where you last clipped into an anchor, which is a lot safer. Now, although climbing disciplines have significant differences, they all share very similar techniques. Andrew Bishart, who's one of the lead writers for Rock and Ice magazine, which is probably the most popular climbing magazine in the United States, says that the best technique is to hang from straight arms and focus on trying to stand up only with legs. Now, the reason he says this is because most people tend to climb a wall like they would climb a ladder, facing it head on and then following their hand movements with their feet. Now, although this will probably get you up easier walls, once you get to harder walls, you need to focus on keeping your arms straight and kicking your legs out so that your arms are only holding the weight of your upper body, which is a lot lighter than your upper body and your legs. Another technique is to keep your body close to the wall. And the way to do that is to push one of your hips into the wall while you're climbing. That also creates extra friction between you and the wall, so you have a less chance of falling off, and you have more reach the closer you are to the wall. And there are many different holds that you'll run into. When you're newer to climbing, most of the time the routes you'll be climbing are mostly jug holds, which are holds that you can grab with the entirety of your hand, maybe like this or open hand. Anyway, if you can reach your whole hand around it, it's probably a jug. Once you get a little further in, you'll run into crimps, which are much smaller. They can only be held with your fingertips, about like this first joint. And when you're crimping, you don't have the same amount of movement that you do with a jug, but it also requires a lot more finger strength, so they're on much harder climbs. Now, some of these techniques and terms are subject to change as the sport continues to grow more popular and more people will develop different techniques to try out. Daniel Duane, who's a writer for the New York Times, wrote an article titled "The Rise of Climbing," and in it he states that in 1989 there were only a couple of climbing gyms in the United States. Now, which is 2015 when he wrote the article, there are 436 gyms in the US and in Canada. Now, not only have the amount of gyms risen, but the popularity with the masses has also risen, as climbing has been accepted as a sport in the Japan 2020 Olympics, specifically sports climbing, speed climbing, and bouldering. Now we've gone over sports climbing and bouldering already, and speed climbing is similar to top roping, except that the goal is, instead of to hit really hard problems, it's to get up decently hard problems as fast as you can. Now, the Olympics will only allow 40 competitors in total, and each competitor will compete over 4 days in each one of these events, and then the winner will be determined by adding up their scores from each one of the events. And even JMU has noticed an increase in popularity in rock climbing over the years, as they have created the Adventure Center, which is a room that not only rents out equipment for camping and mountain biking and everything, but it has rock climbing walls, including bouldering walls and top roping. It also has gear rentals, because it knows that most people probably don't have harnesses and rock climbing shoes laying around. And it also has instructional classes for those who are really new and don't feel comfortable getting up on the wall just yet. Now, in rock climbing, the disciplines, techniques, and their sport's rise in popularity do not fully encompass the activity. The sport has a way of inspiring people, like George Anderson, to conquer the seemingly impossible and to appreciate the world that we live in. Thank you.